I'm Amanda Klutz, Broadway actress, dancer, and celebrity trainer, and I partnered with Equinox to create a custom AK rope class. It's a rhythmic group fitness experience, and music is an integral component. Jump and sculpt using the rope in ways you've never imagined. It's time to get back to moving our bodies. AK Rope, my signature class, now available at Equinox, is a safe, fun, and positive way to do just that.
Empire.
The offseason rolls on, but is there ever really an offseason? And how should players be approaching it? What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode of the Football Jones podcast. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @ByMikeJones. And our guest today is George Atallah, Senior Executive Vice President of the NFL Players Association. He's going to help us get our heads around the off-season program, what voluntary actually means in the NFL, and why the NFLPA is really urging its players to opt against full-on attendance of the off-season program, and why they need to be mindful of their health and safety, and how the Players Union is advising them. It's a really good discussion here, a lot of insight because, as you know, this COVID thing, the numbers are trending in a better way. We've got large portions of the country opening back up, but it's still an issue. And so the Players Association and a lot of players still have concerns about subjecting themselves to risk of COVID. And so because of that, the Players Association really wanted teams to just do this all virtually. Teams do not want to do that. There are some agreements, some modifications and things like that. But we're going to get into why it's best for the players, why it's best for everyone involved, for the NFL to come to a place where these voluntary workouts, which normally are called voluntary, but coaches really frown upon voluntary attendance. They want everybody there. But why the players need to really stick to their guns on this and not feel pressured to show up to these. So here we go. Let's get to it with George Atallah. Hey guys, we're excited to announce a new partnership with the fastest growing daily fantasy sports site on the planet, Monkey Knife Fight. And to kick off this new venture right, our partners at MKF are giving all of our listeners a free $5 game when you create their account and a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 when you use the promo code JONES to make your first deposit. It's a lot of fun. I like going on there in the NBA section with the more or less contest. You pick two players going head to head and pick whether you think they're going to exceed or fall below certain statistical marks. It's fun. You're going to love it. Learn more and claim your free game plus the instant deposit match up to $100 by heading to playmkf.com/Jones. That's playmkf.com/Jones. All right, and here he is. Glad to have him back on the podcast, George Atallah from the NFL Players Association. George, how are you? And how's your off-season going?
Oh, it's great. Everything's going great. Nice to be back. Appreciate the conversation as always.
Yeah, you're like, what off-season, right?
I know.
Yeah.
Apparently, we want to make sure it's voluntary. So let's just be clear about that to start off.
Right, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because I thought J.C. Treader put a very well thought out letter yesterday and kind of explaining the perspective of the players. And you hear a lot from fans who are like, why are they complaining? Show up for the workouts. There's always this pressure by teams and reporters feed into it. They're reporting attendance and who's there and who's not there. But there really was a push this year. It seemed like more than previous years by you guys about like, look, these are voluntary and we shouldn't. And we talked to JC a little while ago. He talked about how we have to be careful still because COVID's not gone. But can you kind of summarize the point of JC's letter for people who missed it on why it's important for the players to keep in mind that these are, and everybody, that these are voluntary workouts, and why players have to be smart?
Yeah, in short, you have 29 weeks between the end of the regular season and training camp. That period includes a 9-week voluntary workout session. During those 9 weeks, from the data that we've compiled and from the lessons we learned from the all virtual offseason last year, players are actually at a higher risk of getting hurt if they choose to attend those voluntary workouts. The entire purpose of what we've been trying to do since we began discussing this issue with the league back in March was primarily understand that there is still and was still a risk at that time of COVID exposure.
Mhm.
And we've seen players test positive at the facility over the last several weeks. So just be aware that this pandemic's not gone away and you're still at risk. And then the second thing was to equip players with the most accurate, most detailed, most up-to-date information so they could make a business decision about what was best for them during the off season. Nobody, and players have shared this with me, and I'm happy to reflect this back to your audience, whoever's listening. Nobody makes the roster in April, May, and June. It just doesn't happen. Players on our executive committee who have hung around the league for a long time have told us stories of they've balled out at OTAs and they still are 4, 5, 6 on the depth chart come training camp. So you really earn the job come training camp. Players are making those business decisions, and that's really the main objective of what we're trying to accomplish.
To that point about not making the roster in April, I feel like from OTAs I've been at, they already know who's who anyway. Like it's very rare that I've seen a guy be kind of a nobody and shine OTAs or training camp. Maybe that you can always tell by the depth chart. Maybe the last week of the preseason, there's some guy who balls out and earns himself a job. But these teams, for the most part, know who they already are going to have on that roster. No?
That's what we've been told by the membership. We know that the players want to stay in shape. We know that they want to prepare for the season year round. They're professionals. They know what they're doing. I think when it comes to the roster spots, look, most players have shared with me, the coaches and the GMs sort of know 1 through 50, right? They sort of know like 1 through 50, these are the players we're going to have on our team. Once you get to the last 6, 7, 8 spots, then it becomes obviously competitive. Then it becomes based on need. Then it becomes a situation where once training camp comes around, who's going to show what they've got and who's going to ball out, so to speak. Even those situations, though, Mike, I mean, you've covered the league on the sports football side as well as anybody. Those roster spots are few and far between. You really have to shine to break through in those last few roster spots.
Now, the arguments of some people is that, okay, these young guys won't have a chance for those slim roster spots if they're not there in OTAs, and the fear of it being held against them there. So from a young perspective, an undrafted rookie, I get why, okay, you probably do want to show up for OTAs if they have them. Like for you, voluntary probably don't really mean voluntary. But, for veteran established guys who already know the playbook, who already have seen many defenses, I mean, why do they even have it? Why not have like a new free agent signing and rookie / undrafted rookie type of offseason, and anybody who's got, tenure, y'all don't have to show up?
Well, you're offering solutions, Mike, and that's just not how things are done in the NFL. But I mean, without being too sarcastic, those are things that our membership is open to talking with the league about, right? And I think COVID, in some ways, has really taught us a lot of lessons about efficiencies, about better ways to do things, about how to prepare players and ramp up for the regular season. And despite what you said about rookies needing, quote unquote, that time in April, May, June, Justin Herbert didn't need it.
Right.
Jefferson didn't need it. How many rookies helped Tampa Bay win a Super Bowl last year in key positions? They didn't seem to be bothered by it.
James Robinson down in Jacksonville, undrafted running back,
Yeah, he played great. So there are a lot of examples of rookie breakthrough seasons and record-breaking seasons last year when there was no offseason. So I'm not sure players buy into this. You need really, like, it's necessary for you to be there. That is a mindset, frankly, that we are really focused on changing. And it does take time. It's not going to take one off season. It does take time to change that type of mentality.
Okay, so a criticism directed at the Players Association that from I've seen on Twitter is that, okay, if y'all care so much about the players and their safety, everything, why didn't you fight harder against the 17th game instead of worry so much about these voluntary workouts? What is your response to that criticism?
How many angry face emojis can we relay on this Zoom? Look, the CBA process was a negotiation based on what the players could get for a 17th game. It's that simple. It is not from a starting point of workouts are voluntary and you don't have to do this, and there's pressure coming down on the players to do something they don't have to do, and so we have to pressure back. That is a much different dynamic than a collective bargaining negotiation where there is an offer on the table from management and every player gets to make a decision about that offer that's on the table, right? So let's go back to the fact that we did negotiate for the voluntary offseason, for this 9-week period to be voluntary. And all we're trying to do is take it back. Literally, that's it. Let's take it back and make sure that every player knows he doesn't have to go. When it comes to the 17th game, and I don't intend to sound smug, but the fortune cookie analysts out there who are tweeting regularly that we didn't fight hard enough, one, have no idea what they're talking about because they didn't go through it. Two, really don't understand the dynamics of collective bargaining, because you really have to then make a decision to go on strike if you don't want a 17th game or withstand a lockout. Players had the choice of whether or not they wanted to do that. And we ended up with a deal where players, more revenue, more benefits, better former player benefits, better health and safety, and all of the things that came with trading stuff for 17th game.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And again,
I'm glad.
These things are voluntary. So, I mean, it wasn't like you guys were going to get more money by getting rid of a voluntary workout session that the teams aren't making any money off of. Your bargaining chip was the 17th game.
17th game, right.
Yeah. Now, what about, this is, I think, a concerning situation with Juwan James in Denver, whereas, okay, so he was doing a workout away from the facility. It was a workout from his coaches or strength staff, got injured, loses a bunch of money, winds up getting cut. So people are like, well, that's why they shouldn't work out away from the facility. How do you see that there? And what is the level of concern from the Players Association with this guy who was doing everything he was supposed to do by instructions from his team, and then it's classified as a non-football injury, even though it wasn't like skiing or water skiing or skating or something like that?
It sucks. It's terrible. And I personally always look at the human aspect of it. It sucks for Juwan. He obviously opted out last year to protect himself and his family from COVID. He was working his way back into shape to to get back to the level that he expected of himself. So it sucks for him. That's where I personally start. And we've reached out to him and talked to him and his agent about what his options are. When it comes to the general issue of NFI, again, let's go to where you and I started this conversation. There are 29 weeks between the end of the Super Bowl and the start of training camp. The logical extension of the argument that you're presenting or that people are presenting is then either A, nobody should work out for 20 of the 29 weeks, or B, the only place they should ever work out is at the facility. Those are the only two foolproof ways for players to protect themselves if you're going to make the argument that they should only work out at the facility, right?
Right.
That's not realistic. That's not realistic in a modern day environment where players have families. They're professionals after all. They players who play in, I don't know, I'm not picking on this city to be mean, but players who play in Buffalo don't live in Buffalo year round.
Right.
They have family homes all over the place. So to expect them to either only work out at the facility for 29 weeks of the year when it's the quote unquote dead period, or not work out at all is a problem. Finally, I'll close with this, and I've been hearing from players about this a lot. Players do take notice when clubs choose to treat a player the way the Broncos treated Juwan. In most cases, there is a settlement or some sort of agreement if a player is working out in order to get better under the coach's direction away from the facility, where a player can recoup some of his money, have some sort of amicable agreement with the club. The fact that that's not the case this year says more about the club and the league than it does about the issue of NFI.
What was their argument that it wasn't? And I know they put out that explanation saying this is an NFI, but how can they argue that someone training to get in shape is a non-football injury when, like, falling down the stairs or slipping in a kitchen, that's a non-football injury. Me, like, trying to get faster at sprints or squats or whatever, or running routes or whatever, that's football related. How can they make that argument that it's not football?
Because that's what they choose to do. And I look at it as, look, let's it's a little bit of a parallel situation if you take it to the average workplace, but most average Americans get 2.5 weeks of vacation, right? You've used up your 2.5 weeks of vacation. You have a family emergency. Can you imagine an employer saying to you, no, you can't go handle your family emergency because you've run out of vacation days?
All right.
The contract is only as good as the relationship between the player and the club. And the contract and what the CBA is sometimes has to call for flexibility and reason and a maintenance of a good relationship and reputation between the club and the player. And that part, it sort of like blows my mind that we're at a point where clearly the league has asked the club to make an example of the player, and the player is a victim when it doesn't have to be that way.
So what are his options now? Can he file a grievance? Would you guys represent something like that? What's the next step now? This dude's on the street, lost a bunch of money, and is he's not going to play this year probably.
Yeah, I have to be a little coy about that because anything that I don't want to share anything or jump.
You can't give us strategy and secrets.
Yes, secrets. Let me tell you a secret. We've got Juwan's back. We're working with him on a daily basis. We're talking to his agent regularly. This is one of those situations where internally, we communicate on every few hours, if not, at a bare minimum. right? So yeah, we do have options. We're looking into them, but we also want to make sure that we give the player and the agent some space to also do what most players do in that situation, was try to figure something out with the club.
Now, and I knew you weren't going to really tell me, but thank you for telling us
You
as
had
much
to ask.
as you could. I had to ask, right? But thanks for making it as clear as you could. In JC's letter, he mentioned that a number of teams, maybe half teams, have negotiated for modified OTA, off-season workout programs with their coaches. What does that entail, and what kind of setups have you guys heard about?
Yeah, that's been the great thing about this process, where players, armed with the information that we have shared with them about injury data, about risk, about missed time injuries, that kind of thing, player leaders on a number of clubs, more than half at last count, have reached out to their coaches and negotiated better workout programs than were intentionally, were intentionally intended, right? So Indianapolis, I think, is only going to do 2 weeks of an off-season program until training camp. Obviously, cutting down a program from 9 weeks to 2 weeks, big deal, big win for the players. Miami, all those guys have showed up in Miami, but they've got the pace that they want, the team meetings that they want, the schedule that they want. Another great example of player leaders stepping up to talk about and figuring out what's best for them. A number of other teams, Arizona is another team that has cut back their program. LA Chargers and Rams have cut back some of their programs. So like JC said in his letter, if you're gonna do an off-season program in a voluntary period, make it worth it for guys to show up. And there's no doubt, look, Mike, players want to get better. Players want to win. Players don't want to, even for the guys who are deciding not to show up over the next couple of days or weeks, they're still working out and doing, whatever they can to get better. Some teams have situations where they want to be in the building, and that's fine, but make it worth it to those guys.
What are training camps going to look like? Do we know yet?
Not quite yet. We're trying to figure that out. We're actively talking to the league about protocols. For humanity's sake, I'm very happy that, and we should all be happy that the numbers on COVID are looking better. That has been a massive relief for many of us, and for all of us, should be for all of us. So we'll see what training camps look like. We're in discussions to sort that out now.
And this year, one less preseason game for the players, for the teams. So that's, on one hand, it's one less opportunity for injury. At the same time, for some, it's one less opportunity to impress your coaches. So what's your advice to young guys like that, as it's kind of a tightrope situation there?
Hard for me to provide advice to young players having never played, but I can relay what I've seen in my career at the NFLPA, which is there is this, as competitive as it can be to win jobs and win roster spots and do those things, there is this camaraderie, this brotherhood amongst NFL players where most of the time veterans or established players in the NFL are going to put their arm around a young guy and try to help bring him along. That really is something that the players have, and we've seen it through this offseason negotiating process, where teams who have decided not to show up are telling their young guys, come work out with me, come work out and get better with me. That is something that I think is pervasive in the league, and long may it continue.
What do you think the offseason program is going to look like a year or 2 years from now?
Hopefully better. Hopefully this year we have started not just a practical change in the way that certain teams approach the offseason, but if there is going to be a program, then again, let's make it uniformly better for all players.
All right, George. Well, I appreciate you joining us. Full of insight, as always. Thanks. And I hope that you get some downtime this off season all this stuff gets going.
I hope so. Let me tell you something. There's no voluntary work in my household. So even if I find some vacation time, well, there's still stuff to be done at home. So
well, we'll sign off quietly so you can keep that door closed for a while. So that way it looks like you're working and you can just have a little bit of decompression.
Exactly. Deep breath. Appreciate you, Mike.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.
This show can be found on Podcast DC, the new local app with hundreds of options in local news, health, and of course, the DMV region. Download the Podcast DC app to hear the Empire shows as well as other great content.
Hey, this is Joel Corey from Inside the Cap. I know you're enjoying Football Jones, hosted by Mike Jones, which goes in depth with coaches, executives, players, and NFL insiders. Once you're done with listening to Football Jones, check out my podcast, Inside the Cap, which explains the ins and outs of the NFL salary cap and player contract negotiations. So enjoy Football Jones, Inside the Cap, and other fine products brought to you by Empire Media.
All right, thanks so much to George for his insight there. I see both sides of this. I understand why players want this scaled back, why they rather than 9 weeks of 3 days a week of practices, why they want that scaled back, and so they have more time with their families, more time to rest and recover and gear up for the season. At the same time, I understand that the plight of young guys wanting to make a good impression on their new coaches, wanting to do everything they can to put themselves in position to compete. So if you're a veteran and you feel good about your standings, hey, stay away. It gives the young guys more opportunity to soak up the instruction and learn it, and then maybe that makes for better competition in OTAs. However, this really is an issue about the non-football injury things. I think that it's going to be a while before they come back to the table negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement. But this thing is, as they say, a living, breathing thing, and there are lots of modifications to this. So the players, their agents, they really need to, when they negotiate contracts, have provisions put in there where a guy can train anywhere during the offseason as long as he's doing what he needs to and doesn't subject to lose a lot of money if he's injured. I think that's a really ridiculous move by the Broncos, so we'll be interested to see how that plays out. So that's it for today. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Thanks again so much for listening. You can read me again at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @MikeJones. Do me a favor, share this podcast with some friends, and don't forget to check out our partners. And I will talk to you guys again next time.